Today we have a look at this 94 engine, and as we dismantle it, check out what sort of damage it's got. There's the engine up on the scissor trolley. I'm about to have a go at that. Before I do, there's the spare engine, and I have put the rear swing arms back on the frame here so that it makes it a rolling chassis. And I'm going to wheel that down the back there, out of the way of the hoist, lower the hoist down, put the ramps down and shove it in the back of the truck because I don't think I need it for a while. I've taken the cover off the oil filter and examined the filter element, and there's fine pieces of metal in it. There's also a little bit of sludgy oil in the bottom. Oh, that's some of the metal that was in the bottom of the pickup, and there's finer pieces in the filter. So there's been a bit of metal going through the engine. Well, that's inside the clutch cover. I haven't wiped that at all. It hasn't got sticky oil all over it like the other one did. It has got a little bit of gunk in the bottom, certainly not loaded with metal. It may have fine particles in it. That looks okay for starters. Well, that's what it's looking like under the clutches. Again, I haven't wiped anything there. That oil there, if anything, looks clear, not black. There's black remnants down the bottom here, but you wipe your finger through some of those spots and they're not necessarily gritty. So my assessment of that is it's not too bad at this stage. I'll keep going. Alright, I'm ready to pull the flywheel. I've taken the nut off the crankshaft there that holds the flywheel down onto the tapered part of the shaft. I'm adding a couple of washers and a nut to the end of the flywheel that holds the recoil cup on, and then my puller with the thread internally there bites onto the thread down there and screws on about 6 turns. And then this is the push bolt at the top there. Now it's a 2-end job, so I'm going to try to set this camera up above me here on my hoist, and hopefully it remains sort of in shot enough. I'm tightening this bolt down. There it pops up and is done. And that's not lifting off there because those nuts are larger than the bore, I think. Oh no, yeah, it's popping off altogether. And there's the sprayed clutch in the back there. That was the key, which didn't come out last time. I'll just sit that there. So that's how the puller works. So there's a little wood rough key that goes into the crankshaft around here. there's the keyway there. It's this tapered section here that the flywheel pulls up on, and it needs a fair bit of crunching to get that to come then. I don't know whether that was obvious, but anyway, it popped up, and that's how the puller works. Well, I've had a disassembly issue, which I don't think it's been a major catastrophe, but interesting. This bearing, there's one on there that came off easily, and one on there stayed in the case. It was on there on the other box. This one stayed on the shaft and came off easily, and there's a shim behind it. There's no shim on that one. This bearing stayed in the case on the other one, but it stayed on the shaft on this one, and it wasn't keen to come off. Now, I used a puller like this on it and put a bit of load on it, and it still wouldn't come. In fact, it sheared the leg on this. The prong on the bottom broke off, and I had to build up another foot with TIG welding and grind it back to roughly the shape of the other ones. That's a real one, and that's the one I've made. And it ultimately worked, but it still wouldn't come off. So I, out of desperation, applied some hot air from a hot air gun. Got it quite hot. I applied the yield material, hoping it might penetrate somewhat, and still no luck. I let it cool right down again, applying plenty of yield. And in the end, with this back on the bearing, I was trying to take a bit of weight on this collar and gave the end of the screw itself a hit, and pump, it moved. Now it moved halfway and seemed to be stuck again, and I couldn't work that out. I was putting plenty of pressure on this. Turned out I was at the top of this thread here at that point. Not initially. It moved halfway down the bearing where my finger was there. It started to jam up in the tool itself. So I then added some small washers in here, which gave me more travel on the puller, and it pulled the rest of the way off. And I thought, all right, we're done. But when it came off, there's a chunk missing out of the back of the bearing, and it's still sitting there on the shaft, which is interesting. It's like it's welded itself to the shaft because it's not wanting to just push away there at the moment. And the shim is in there behind it. It's blackened. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, this shaft does not turn. This shaft does not normally turn, although it is turning there. I'll have to have a look at the other side. Maybe it does turn, but that welded on there is indicative of not enough oil getting up here. I don't know. I'll knock that off to disassemble. I can now take that gear off. While the bearing was on there, I couldn't take that gear off and pull this side of the thing apart. But Andy, the mechanic, saw a problem on this shaft on a gearbox he pulled apart, and it was related to a collar on the lower gear there seizing to the shaft he suspects through lack of oil. But anyway, that bearing is toast. I know there's a good one in the other gearbox. Maybe this whole shaft is toast, but that's an issue, and it's an issue I wasn't expecting to find, so we'll keep going. There's a close-up of the damage to, I think it's the lay shaft, it's the end of the lay shaft in the centre of the box. But it's that chip, which I sat just there, has picked up and friction welded itself to this shaft, and there's still a little bit of a burr around there that is this gear normally slides up over that, and it's you can see the washer is sticking in the welded area there. This is the shim. It's a black shim. It's been hot, and so I'm going to have a go with a needle file and see whether I can knock the tops off some of those bumps. This is a shitty needle file, but I thought if I hit it just there with a thin file, it won't affect the rest of the shaft. But given I've got another shaft in the other box, I don't know that it matters too much. What's more important at the moment is I can pull that off to get the disassembly underway. I'll have a go. So there's the damage to that shaft. It took a bit of filing away with that needle file to just knock the tops off the burrs from that, so that the washer would pass over it, and once the washer passed over it, the whole cog came past. That had to come off to get this side of the box off. So yeah, that's interesting. Whether that's been caused by the blow up, who knows. Yeah, look, that is the counter shaft of the internal gearbox, and it does rotate. It rotates, but it doesn't actually affect the cogs that are on this side of the gearbox as such. It just spins away. And why the inner, which should be stuck to this shaft anyway, would bind up on it is a bit curious, because the bearing itself spins. These shafts have got oil pumped through them. This cog at the bottom spins on a collar which is keyed to the shaft, and this cog drives to the shaft when the dog goes down and locks into it. You see the dogs on there. When the dog slides down and locks into that, that's freewheeling on the shaft at the moment. But when the dogs lock into it, it locks it to the shaft. This is the input shaft to this sub-trans, and if that cog there is locked to this input shaft, then it drives the output cog there directly. If the dog that's on here is up, engaged with this upper cog that sits on here, that the drive comes in here across to the cog that's sitting on the lay shaft here, which is fixed solid to the other cog, the larger, and the other cog drives back to this one, which is free spinning, to the output. So it comes in here, across there, down there, across to here. This one just acts as intermediate that does nothing and drives to the output there. So look, those bits are off now, and I can, this side's done. I know I do need to actually remove a circlip on here and a circlip on there so that those shafts can come out when the case is separated. So I'll do that now. Okay, got the case apart. Eventually, it was hanging up in different places to the other one, but this is what I was expecting to find. Pieces of piston. There's a gudgeon pin clip there. Mass of it mostly in the bottom of the crankshaft, as you'd sort of expect. Some of it's found its way down the back. I'm going to pick through those pieces, see what I can see, then try and wipe this case out to see whether there's actually any damage to the case. I'll just concentrate on this side initially. A fair bit of gritty looking stuff in the back there, but the chunks are still up the front here. I've stacked a lot of the pieces just in that half. I've had a first go at a bit of a degreaser and a hose down of this half, and that's some of the pieces I've fished out of the crankcase, and there would have been nearly half a cup of granulated stuff as well. Wash all these bits up tomorrow, see what's usable. I can't actually see in this half any real damage to the casting, so hopefully we've got a similar situation over there. That's all I got done today, so get out to your shed and have some fun yourself.